All right, Martin Popoff here from the Contrarians for another edition of Reliving Old Reviews as a useless tool of confusion. This is a show where we look at old reviews of big classic albums and see what they thought at the time and how it fits in the milieu of the times and all that kind of stuff. And it's basically me reviewing a review. So today we're going to look at Metallica's And Justice for All. Let me grab this here. I've got this one framed up. Here's my And Justice for All vinyl, just signed by James, but we've got a fully signed CD in there. And of course, I can still supply my Metallica book, only the softcover version actually at this point. But this was updated with an extra album. What did we call this thing? With a complete illustrated history. And martinpopoff.com for that. So And Justice for All, this is a review from Kerrang, Xavier Russell. So I mean Xavier Russell's a legend. I'm sure he's going to get it right in Kerrang magazine here. But let's see what Xavier has to say. Spoiler alert, he gets 5 Ks. So this is the maximum grade in Kerrang. But let's see what he has to say about this weird album arriving. Like, it was quite a strange record. I remember at the time, I can't get out of my head how I got this as a double vinyl, not a CD, because 1988 is 2 years before CDs really took over, kind of thing, right? So it was this double album with like 2 songs on 3 of the sides and 3 songs on 1 of the sides. It's just weirdly, it just felt like an overflow sort of album. Like, oh, we couldn't fit this on one vinyl. It was very, very strange. But yeah, that's clouded my opinion of this album ever since, sort of thing. So Xavier writes, here it is, folks, Metallica's finest album since Kill 'Em All. Yeah, I can't believe it either. Even though Lars himself recently told me that people have already been saying that And Justice for All is the metal album of the 80s. There you go, Lars promoting it. I don't think it's the best since Kill 'Em All. My favorite Metallica is Ride the Lightning, probably followed by Master. Why? It was only the other day at Donington in the Kerrang hospitality tent that I heard Kill 'Em All again. I mean, have you heard the album on compact disc? It sounds as fresh and new today as when it was released back in late '83. By the way, it looks like every single C in this is going to be changed to a K in this review. And that's what's so special about Metallica. Yeah, Metallica is even spelled with a K. Their music is timeless. Can you just imagine? And Justice for All still being played in the year 2010. It's an eerie thought, but very realistic. Now, before I carry on, there is one point I'd like to clear up here and now, and that is a lot of people have accused me over the past years of having unnecessary digs at Metallica whenever I get the opportunity, by comparing them to the likes of Halloween, Slayer, Celtic Frost, and Creator. But it's only ever been in a journalistic way. There is no bitterness between me and Metallica. There never has been and never will be. Back in the early days, I always tried to help them out whenever I could, because I truly believed that one day metal was going to say thrash. But Lars loathes and detests the term. Didn't know that. So Lars doesn't like to be called a thrash band. I didn't know that in the 80s. Fans worldwide would finally wake up to this thing I like to call Metallica power. Right. Let's take a closer look at And Justice for All. The first thing you notice when you hear the album is Lars' drum sound, which is really odd, and I can't quite put my finger on it. Mick Wall has also picked up on the point, and we're both baffled by it, but it's all part of the Metallica sound. Just listen to his opening snare beats on Blackened, and you'll see what I mean. As for the tune itself, well, typical Metallica, and so is the running time, 6 minutes, 40 seconds. But the song works at its best in the scherzo. If you're into decay in a big way, then this is the cut for you. This is really hard to read because, like I say, every single C is changed to a K. So it's like there's a lot of C's in the world, it turns out. Commander Hetfield and Kirk Hamster really sizzle on Blackened. It's interesting. He's pointing out the drum sound, and the drum sound is really futuristic on here. I always like to think that this sound had a lot of effect on Vinnie Paul and the Pantera sound as well. Hasn't mentioned the lack of bass yet, but anyways, let's see what he says. The title cut follows and runs a magical 9 minutes, 45 seconds. And the only way I can really describe it is by saying it's a Metallica chugger. Chug, 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 chug. Eye the Beholder follows and is easily the best cut on the album. You've just got to hear the main riff on this song almost Dockenish in places. It's that commercial. Wow, never thought of that. And when Commander Hetfield snarls, "Do you hear what I hear?" I can certainly hear the sound of distant tills ringing. I'm very surprised the folks at Phonogram don't pick "I" as the first single, because it's easily the strongest song Metallica have written since the Four Horsemen. Wow, I never would have picked that one out of the pack. If Justice is supposedly the album of the 80s, then "Eye of the Beholder" is the anthem of the 80s. I haven't been so moved by a song since Blue Oyster Cult's Joan Crawford. Love it. I personally love Joan Crawford more than any song on this album, but I do love the song. The pace slows down on one, with some tasty playing from Kirk Hempster, but not surprisingly changing gears for a climatic ending to side one. One thing there isn't too much of on Justice is bass, a point that has already been brought up by Def Barton, Chippy Cheeseburger, Chirazi, and Del Boy Oliver. But Jason Newsted finally gets his chance on Harvester of Sorrow, the band's current single, and just sit back in amazement at Kirk Hempster's solo halfway through. And that fine riffing continues on the frayed ends of Sanity. Great stop-start stuff. My Soul Complaint follows, and that is the total unnecessary acoustic guitar on To Live Is To Die, which runs a staggering 9 minutes and 48 seconds. The acoustics just get in the way of the mighty Metallica riffs, which thankfully in the end drown the tinkling guitars. And here we are at Journey's End with Dyer's Eve, a fast one and the only real thrasher on the entire album. Listen closely to the main riff. Doesn't it sound like What Shall We Do with a Drunken Sailor? Love it. Classic stuff and a perfect way to end a perfect album. Yes, and Justice for All will finally put Metallica into the big league where they belong. Can't wait for the tour in September, by which time, of course, I'm sure you'll all be familiar with the album, and don't forget to cry for Eye of the Beholder. Yeah, it's interesting. Xavier really talks about, album of the 80s, this is going to be so commercial and stuff. I mean, it did catapult them further, and he's right, and I'm kind of wrong in my thinking. I remember at the time thinking this is a really bizarre and non-commercial album, but it just seemed like the talent of Metallica could not be stopped. If they're going to give you something way more challenging and labyrinthine than Master or Ride or Kill 'Em All, it was still going to be accepted because they're just a good band. They're just good and talented. So even if they give you something not very commercial, it's going to do well. And of course, we've got One. They do a video for One. It becomes a massive hit, and it's semi a ballad, but it's a thrash ballad. It's a progressive thrash ballad, right? So yeah, good review from Xavier. So this has been another. There's my sheet taken out of a Kerrang. This has been another Reliving Old Reviews is useless tool of confusion. Check out my audio podcast, History in 5 Songs with Martin Popoff. Check out all our other Contrarian shows. I'm doing a series called Who Invented Heavy Metal. We're still in kind of the 60s, 1970 on that as I'm doing this. But you can join our Patreon. That gets you onto our panel situations. Please subscribe, get those numbers up. A lot of people watch these shows. They don't subscribe. But yeah, join the Patreon, and you can be on our panels and do some of those shows as well. But yeah, go listen to some old Metallica. Let us know what you think of this album and my review of this review and Xavier's review. There you go. And Justice for All.